A single object can unravel the story we tell ourselves about the past. These are out-of-place artifacts, physical mysteries that do not fit within the timeline we have carefully constructed. By the end of this journey, you will see 20 pieces of evidence that could force us to rewrite chapters of human history. How could a complex mechanical computer exist 2,000 years ago? And why does a medieval map seem to show a continent buried under ice for millions of years? Each discovery is a puzzle piece from a picture we do not yet fully see. What does it mean when the past holds technology that feels like it belongs to our future? The heart of the mystery lies in that jarring sense of wrongness. An out-of-place artifact is not merely old, it is impossibly old for what it represents. The official term is OOP art, an acronym that sounds like something from a science fiction novel. In essence, it describes any physical object discovered in a layer of earth, a tomb, or a geological stratum that simply does not belong there according to everything we think we know. The mismatch can take several forms. Perhaps it is a tool made with a precision that should not exist for another 1,000 years, found sealed under undisturbed rock. Maybe it is a material like pure aluminum, appearing centuries before the industrial processes required to create it were invented. Or it could be a depiction, a map or a carving, showing a landmass that was supposedly unknown to the culture that drew it. These are not simple dating errors or misplaced heirlooms. They are chronological rebels, items that stand in direct contradiction to the established timeline of human technological and cultural development. When we hold one, we are not just holding history, we are holding a question. The artifact presents a stark choice. Either our understanding of the past is fundamentally incomplete, or the story of the object itself has been misunderstood. This tension between a physical piece of evidence and the accepted narrative is what gives each OOP art its profound weight. They are not just curiosities, they are challenges. And as we move through our list, this definition will transform from a dry concept into a living, breathing mystery with each new discovery we uncover. This clash of interpretations creates a charged atmosphere around every new discovery. On one side stands the established discipline of archaeology, a science built layer by literal layer. Its practitioners are the detectives of the deep past, trained to interpret not just an object, but its precise context, the soil it was found in, the artifacts beside it, the wear patterns on its surface. Their greatest tool is skepticism, a necessary filter to separate genuine history from hopeful fiction. When confronted with an anomaly, the mainstream response is often to look for the most plausible, earth-bound explanation. Could it be a modern object that fell into an older dig site? Might the dating method itself be flawed? Is there a chance, however small, of a clever forgery designed to deceive? This rigorous, sometimes cautious approach is what protects the historical record from being rewritten by every curious rock or coincidence. It demands extraordinary evidence for extraordinary claims. Yet, on the other side of this divide, a chorus of researchers and enthusiasts sees not excessive caution, but a closed door. They argue that the standard timeline is a rigid cage, and that these out-of-place artifacts are the keys bending the bars. Their theories are grand in scope, speaking of advanced civilizations lost to time, like Atlantis or Lemuria, whose survivors seeded knowledge across the globe. They suggest possibilities of ancient global exploration long before the accepted voyages of Columbus or Zheng He. Some look even further, pondering whether such objects could be evidence of contact from beyond our world. This camp accuses mainstream science of dogma, of ignoring evidence that does not fit the consensus. The truth, as it often does, likely resides somewhere in the uneasy space between these poles. Not every anomaly is a secret history. But to dismiss them all as mistakes is to ignore the persistent, prickling questions they raise. The real value of these objects may not be in proving any one alternative theory, but in their power to humble us. They remind us that history is not a finished book, but a story we are still deciphering, with new sentences sometimes found written in stone, metal, and clay. It is with this balanced perspective, one that respects scientific rigor but honors genuine mystery, that we approach our first and perhaps most famous OOP art. The deep blue waters off the Greek island of Antikythera hide a secret that would take a century to fully comprehend. In the year 1901, sponge divers exploring an ancient Roman-era shipwreck brought up a lump of corroded bronze and wood, its form so encrusted it was initially set aside with other less remarkable finds. It was just a curious, heavily damaged lump, seemingly unimportant next to the statues and pottery. But this unassuming object, now known as the Antikythera Mechanism, would become one of the most profound archaeological discoveries of all time, a ghost in the machine of history. When researchers finally began to carefully clean and study it decades later, using advanced imaging techniques like X-ray tomography, they were stunned. Inside that calcified shell was not a simple statue or tool, but an intricate clockwork universe, a complex system of at least 30 interlocking bronze gears, precisely cut and mounted within a wooden frame, all designed to be operated by a hand crank. This was not merely an ornament, it was a functional device of breathtaking genius, a portable cosmos made of metal. Its purpose, as scholars have painstakingly reconstructed, was to model the heavens. By turning the crank, an operator could calculate the positions of the sun, the moon, and likely the 5 known planets against the backdrop of the zodiac. It could predict lunar and solar eclipses, track the cycles of the Olympic Games, and account for the irregular orbit of the moon with a specific gear that mimicked its variable speed, a concept known as lunar anomaly. This level of mechanical sophistication, employing principles like differential gearing, represents a technological peak that simply vanishes from the historical record after this device was lost at sea around 100 years before the Common Era. Nothing of comparable mechanical complexity would appear again until the astronomical clocks of medieval Europe, over 1,000 years later. The mechanism forces a profound question upon us. It is not a question of whether ancient Greeks understood astronomy. We know they did. It is a question of engineering. Who were the craftsmen who could conceive of and manufacture such a precise instrument? What workshop, what school of thought produced this marriage of cosmic theory and intricate mechanics? The Antikythera Mechanism stands as a silent, rusted monument to a path not taken. It suggests a parallel timeline where the mechanical age began not in the 1400s, but before the birth of Christ. Its very existence whispers of a lost chapter in human ingenuity, a peak of knowledge that was somehow forgotten, its secrets sinking beneath the waves for 2,000 years. It compels us to wonder if this one device survived by sheer chance. What other mechanical marvels from the ancient world have been lost to time, leaving no trace for us to find? The ghost of ancient mechanics is not alone. In the dusty soil of Mesopotamia, another whisper of forgotten knowledge was unearthed, one that seems to crackle with a different kind of power. During excavations near Baghdad in the 1930s, archaeologists uncovered a set of peculiar objects that seemed utterly mundane at first glance. They consisted of simple terracotta pots, each about the size of a fist, sealed with asphalt. Inside each pot was a rolled copper cylinder, and within that cylinder an iron rod. Individually, the pieces were unremarkable, the kind of fragments often overlooked, but together they formed a configuration that sent a jolt through our understanding of antiquity. When these components were assembled and the pot was filled with an acidic liquid, something remarkable happened. vinegar, or perhaps fermented grape juice would react with the metals, creating a small but measurable electric current. In essence, this 2,000-year-old artifact functioned as a primitive battery, a galvanic cell predating the famous work of Alessandro Volta by nearly 2 millennia. The immediate and tantalizing question is, of course, what was it for? The official name, the Baghdad Battery, implies a function that remains hotly debated. There is no ancient instruction manual, no wall carving that clearly shows its use. Some researchers propose a practical application in electroplating, suggesting a method to deposit a thin layer of gold or silver onto other objects, a technique that would explain certain fine metallic finishes found on artifacts from the period. Others look toward the realm of healing, wondering if the gentle tingling current was used in therapeutic or ceremonial practices, a form of ancient medicine that harnessed this invisible force. There is also the possibility it served a religious function, perhaps to create a mysterious sensation in a temple setting, or to power a simple electrical display connected to a statue. The truth is, we may never know its precise purpose with certainty, but the profound implication lies not in what it was used for, but in the simple fact that it worked at all. Its existence is a physical proof of concept. Someone, in the centuries around the birth of Christ, in the region between the Tigris and Euphrates rivers, understood enough about materials and chemistry to intentionally create electricity. They knew that specific metals, combined with a specific fluid, could generate this elusive effect. This represents not a full-blown electrical grid, but a spark of experimentation, a curiosity about the natural world that moved beyond theory into tangible, crafted reality. The Baghdad Battery challenges the linear narrative of invention. It suggests that the path to understanding electricity was not a straight line beginning in the 1800s, but a dotted line, with flashes of comprehension appearing, fading, and being rediscovered across the ages. It forces us to look at ancient artisans not merely as skilled copyists of tradition, but as tinkerers and explorers, quietly conducting experiments whose purpose is now lost to time, leaving behind only these cryptic clay pots as clues to their silent, sparking curiosity. The silent spark of the Baghdad Battery is a subtle clue, but some discoveries strike with the blunt force of pure impossibility. In the arid landscape of California's Coso Mountains, the year 1961 began like any other day for a group of mineral collectors. They were searching for geodes, those rough stone spheres that hide crystalline treasures within. Using a diamond saw, they carefully cut open one promising find, expecting the glitter of quartz or amethyst. Instead, they were met with a sight that defied all expectation. Inside the hardened shell was not a natural crystal formation, but something that looked unmistakably mechanical. At its heart was a circular metal shaft, and surrounding it, a ceramic ring with a hexagonal pattern. The entire object was encased in a thick, dense layer of hardened clay and fossilized shells. To the discoverers, it appeared they had found a modern device, something akin to a spark plug, completely imprisoned within what seemed to be ancient stone. The immediate conclusion was staggering. If the encasing material was truly ancient, then this mechanical object must be equally old. Initial, unofficial estimates suggested the concretion could be 500,000 years old, a number that would place this artifact in a time when early humans were just beginning to use simple stone tools. The idea was electrifying. A spark plug from 500,000 years ago would be the ultimate out-of-place artifact, shattering every timeline of human progress. X-ray images were taken, fueling the mystery further. They seemed to show intricate internal components, a central shaft, and what looked like a small washer or spacer. The story spread rapidly through alternative history circles, presented as undeniable proof of an advanced prehistoric civilization or even visitors from beyond our world. The Coso artifact became a legend, a perfect symbol of anachronistic technology. Yet, as with all compelling mysteries, a closer examination by geologists and skeptical researchers introduced a more earthly, though no less fascinating, narrative. The key lay in the encasing material itself. Experts in mineral formations identified it not as million-year-old rock, but as a concretion. Concretions are hard, compact masses that form quite rapidly, often around a central object, as mineral cement binds sediment together. They can develop in decades, not millennia. The most plausible explanation is that the object is exactly what it resembles, a champion brand spark plug from the early 1920s, perhaps lost or discarded by a miner or prospector. Over the following decades, mineral-rich water percolated around it, slowly building up layers of hard clay and lime, eventually fossilizing small shells and creating a perfect, misleading stone shell. The internal X-ray details, once hailed as complex machinery, were reinterpreted as the simple, corroded remains of the spark plug's metal electrode and porcelain insulator. This case represents a crucial pivot point in our exploration. The Coso Artifact teaches a dual lesson. On one hand, it underscores the powerful human desire to find evidence that upends our understanding, to discover a tangible relic from a forgotten age of gods or astronauts. The initial excitement is a testament to that yearning. On the other hand, it highlights the essential role of rigorous analysis. Often, the most extraordinary claim has a very ordinary explanation. Yet, even in its likely prosaic truth, the artifact's story remains valuable. It reminds us that the line between a world-changing anomaly and a simple, misidentified object can be incredibly thin, shaped by layers of hope, interpretation, and the slow, patient work of the earth itself. The real mystery sometimes is not the object, but our own relentless drive to see a lost world in a stone. The line between a modern tool and an ancient relic can be forged by the earth itself, as the story of the London hammer powerfully demonstrates. In the year 1936, near the town of London, Texas, a couple walking along a creek bed made a startling discovery. Partially embedded in a large, hardened rock formation was what appeared to be an ordinary carpenter's hammer. The wooden handle was petrified, turned to stone, and the iron head was fused seamlessly within a solid concretion of Cretaceous rock. This was not a hammer lying on the ground. It was a hammer that the stone itself seemed to have grown around. The geological stratum where it was found is conventionally dated to be well over 100 million years old, a period when dinosaurs roamed and the very first mammals were small, shrew-like creatures. The immediate, breathtaking implication was that a human-made tool existed in an era before humans, or even our most distant primate ancestors, had evolved. The hammer presented a paradox in its simplest form, a clearly manufactured object in a place where it absolutely should not be. Skeptics offer a compelling and more grounded explanation. They point to the nature of the concretion, the hard mineral shell that encases the hammer head. Concretions can form relatively quickly in the right chemical conditions, as mineral-rich water deposits layers around a central object. In this view, the hammer is not 100 million years old, but perhaps a few hundred. It could be a tool lost by a miner or settler in the 1800s, which then became the nucleus for a rapidly forming mineral nodule. The surrounding rock, they argue, is not the ancient bedrock itself, but a younger concretion that formed within it, creating a powerful illusion of immense age. Yet, even with this rational explanation, the London hammer retains its provocative edge. The process by which a wooden handle becomes completely petrified, molecule by molecule replaced with stone, is not typically a fast one. The seamless integration of the object into the stone matrix is visually jarring, challenging our intuitive sense of time. It forces us to question the reliability of context. If an object can become so perfectly, deceptively entombed, how many other artifacts might we have misdated or misunderstood because of similar geological sleight of hand? The hammer's true value lies in this persistent questioning. It invites us to ponder the extremes, not necessarily of lost civilizations, but of geological processes themselves. Could certain catastrophic events, like massive floods or volcanic activity, accelerate mineral formation in ways we have not fully accounted for? Are our dating methods for stone contexts always infallible when dealing with isolated, anomalous formations? The London hammer does not demand we believe in Cretaceous carpenters, but it does insist we remain humble before the complex, patient, and occasionally misleading artistry of the natural world. It is a lesson in perception, a reminder that the story told by stone is not always the story of the object it holds. From the grounded mystery of a hammer in stone, we venture into a legend that soars among the stars. High in the remote Bayan Kara Ula Mountains along the border between China and Tibet, a story was born that would come to define the fusion of out-of-place artifacts with cosmic speculation. In 1938, according to a controversial account, a Chinese archaeologist named Kai Pute discovered a series of caves that held a bizarre secret. Inside, arranged with apparent intention, were hundreds of peculiar stone discs, each roughly 9 inches in diameter with a small hole in the center, resembling ancient phonograph records. Their most intriguing feature was a fine, continuous spiral groove running from the edge to the center. Upon closer inspection, this groove was said not to be a simple decorative pattern, but a line of incredibly tiny, unknown hieroglyphic characters, a script so small it required a magnifying glass to see. The cave itself was also reported to contain unusual burial sites, with skeletal remains described as small and delicate with disproportionately large skulls. The narrative that emerged from these elements was extraordinary. Translations of the microscopic script, as the story goes, revealed a tragic tale. The discs were allegedly 12,000 years old, and their text told of a group of beings called the Dropa, whose spacecraft crashed in the inhospitable mountains long ago. Unable to repair their vessel, the survivors tried to make peace with the local tribes but were met with fear and misunderstanding. The discs were their recorded history, a plea for understanding cast in stone. This account, filled with the imagery of ancient astronauts and lost contact, captured the global imagination and became a cornerstone of alternative history. It presented what seemed like physical proof, the stones themselves, alongside a narrative that answered one of humanity's oldest questions: are we alone? The legend of the Dropa Stones is a powerful case study in how an out-of-place artifact can transcend archaeology and become a modern myth. It highlights a profound human tendency, when confronted with an object that defies easy explanation, to reach for the most expansive story possible. A strange disc is not just a disc, it becomes a record. An unusual skeleton is not just an individual from an ancient culture, it becomes a visitor. The unknown script becomes a message. This leap is not about evidence, but about meaning. It demonstrates how these artifacts act as blank canvases upon which we project our deepest cosmological curiosities and our desire for a past that is more wondrous, more connected to the cosmos than our standard timelines allow. Yet, the scholarly view of the Dropa Stones is far more terrestrial and largely dismissive. Most mainstream archaeologists and historians consider the entire narrative a hoax, a layered fabrication that emerged in the mid-20th century. Investigations have failed to locate the original discs in any museum collection, and the principal figures in the story, like Kai Pute, are unverified. The description of the discs often matches known Neolithic artifacts called by discs, ceremonial jade objects with a central hole but no microscopic writing. The unusual skeletal remains, if they existed at all, could be explained by any number of cultural burial practices or even the effects of time on preserved remains. The grand, cinematic story of stranded extraterrestrials collapses under the weight of these practical questions. but to simply label it a hoax and move on misses the point of its enduring power. The Dropa Stones legend persists not because of its factual credibility, but because of its emotional and narrative resonance. It represents the ultimate form of the out-of-place artifact, one that is not just out of time but out of this world. It shows how these mysteries serve a function beyond challenging history books. They challenge our sense of place in the universe. They allow us to ask, what if, on a scale that is literally astronomical. In doing so, they remind us that the human drive to find meaning in the unknown is itself a powerful, enduring force, sometimes crafting stories just as intricate as the grooves on a stone disc. A wooden bird can hold more than just the shape of a creature. It can hold the shape of an idea. In 1898, within a tomb at Saqqara, Egypt, archaeologists uncovered a small, delicate artifact carved from sycamore wood. Dated to roughly 200 years before the Common Era, it was catalogued simply as a model of a bird. At first glance, that is exactly what it appears to be, a stylized falcon with a graceful beak and a painted eye. But a longer look reveals features that feel strangely familiar to a modern eye. The artifact, now known as the Saqqara Bird, possesses a distinct fuselage, straight, aerofoil-shaped wings that are flat on the bottom and rounded on top, and a vertical tail fin that stands perpendicular to the wings, unlike any bird in nature. This configuration looks less like an ornithological study and more like the basic blueprint for a fixed-wing glider. The traditional interpretation from Egyptology is understandably cautious. It is seen as a ritual object, perhaps a child's toy, or a symbolic representation of a bird for religious purposes. In a culture rich with animal deities, a falcon model is far from unusual. Yet the precise, non-ornamental design of the wings and tail nags at the imagination. What if it was not merely a symbol, but a model of something observed or conceived? This question moved from speculation into the realm of experiment when decades later, aviation enthusiasts and engineers took a closer look. They constructed precise, scaled-up replicas of the Saqqara bird, weighted according to its proportions. When launched, these models did something remarkable. They exhibited stable, aerodynamic glide characteristics, with the addition of a small horizontal stabilizer on the tail, which some argue might have been present on the original but broken off. The performance was said to be even more impressive. The artifact, it seemed, was not just shaped like a bird, it was shaped by principles of lift and stability. This does not mean the ancient Egyptians had airports. There is no evidence of full-sized craft, engines, or a tradition of aviation, but it opens a fascinating possibility, one of observation and mimicry. Could a brilliant artisan have observed the flight of a bird of prey, perhaps a falcon soaring on thermal currents with its wings held stiff, and attempted to capture not just its likeness, but the very secret of its glide in a carved wooden form? This would make the Saqqara bird not a piece of technology, but a piece of proto-engineering, a physical hypothesis about flight. It represents a moment of inquiry frozen in wood. The object challenges us to reconsider the boundary between art and applied science in the ancient world. Were such models merely decorative, or could they have served as three-dimensional sketches, conceptual tools for thinkers who pondered the mechanics of their world? The Saqqara bird may never provide a definitive answer, but its silent, poised form asks a profound question that bridges millennia. It asks us to look beyond an artifact's label and see the potential for inspiration, for a moment when human curiosity looked at the sky and tried, in its own humble way, to understand the physics of ascent. The silent glide of a wooden bird gives way to a far more chaotic gallery etched in stone. In the arid coastal region of Ica, Peru, a local physician named Dr. Javier Cabrera began amassing a collection in the 1960s that would become legendary and deeply controversial. Farmers from the area brought him thousands of palm-sized stones carved from gray andesite, each covered in intricate, shallow line drawings. But these were not typical ancient motifs of gods or animals. The images depicted on the Ica stones were astonishing, showing scenes that seemed to tear pages from a science textbook and paste them onto a prehistoric canvas. There were unmistakable renderings of creatures we recognize as dinosaurs, like Triceratops and Stegosaurus, often interacting with humans. Other stones illustrated complex medical procedures, including what appeared to be heart transplants and cesarean sections performed with precision. Still others showed advanced astronomical charts, telescopes, and even maps of unknown continents. Dr. Cabrera developed a grand theory, proposing that the stones were a vast, encoded library left by a lost, technologically superior civilization that coexisted with dinosaurs and possessed knowledge far beyond our own historical understanding. The sheer volume of the collection, eventually numbering in the tens of thousands, and the consistency of the artistic style lent an air of credibility to the extraordinary claims. For those searching for proof of a forgotten golden age, the Ica stones appeared to be the ultimate evidence, a literal lithic record of an impossible past. They seemed to answer every question about out-of-place artifacts with a resounding, carved declaration that ancient history was utterly wrong. Yet, the foundation of this elaborate narrative proved to be as fragile as the stones were hard. Critical investigation revealed fatal flaws. The stones had no verifiable archaeological provenance. They were not excavated from a dated tomb or found within a specific, studied layer of earth. They simply appeared, brought to Cabrera by farmers who found them or, as would later be revealed, created them. The most damning evidence came when one of the main suppliers, a farmer named Basilio Ashuya, confessed to creating the stones himself. He demonstrated the technique using a simple dental drill to carve the lines and then aging the stones with cow dung to give them a patina of antiquity. He explained that he and others crafted the images inspired by comic books, textbooks, and popular magazines, selling them to tourists and enthusiasts. The entire sprawling library, it seemed, was a modern cottage industry. The story of the Ica stones is a pivotal, sobering chapter in our exploration. It serves as the essential cautionary tale within the world of out-of-place artifacts. Its lesson is not about the stones themselves, but about our relationship to mystery. It illustrates how an intense, genuine desire for revolutionary evidence can create a market, both economic and intellectual, that others are all too willing to supply. Dr. Cabrera, by many accounts, was a true believer, not a fraudster. His willingness to accept the stones at face value, fueled by his own interpretive framework, shows how confirmation bias can build entire worlds upon shaky ground. The Ica stones underscore why the scientific method demands more than just a compelling object. It requires context, provenance, and the ability for other experts to examine the chain of custody. Without these safeguards, we are left with only a story, and a story, no matter how captivating, is not history. This episode does not invalidate the genuine mysteries we have seen, like the Antikythera Mechanism or the Baghdad Battery, which have clear archaeological context. Instead, it draws a crucial line. It teaches discernment. It reminds us that the pursuit of lost knowledge must be tempered with rigorous scrutiny, for the real past is precious, and its truth is often guarded not by conspiracy, but by our own responsibility to ask the right and sometimes the hardest questions. Yet the most compelling evidence is not always a tool or a carving, but a drawing of the world itself. In the Topkapi Palace Museum in Istanbul, a single surviving fragment of a larger map continues to ignite one of history's most heated geographical debates. It was drawn on gazelle skin in 1513 by the Ottoman admiral and cartographer Piri Reis, who noted in his own marginal writings that he compiled it from 20 different source charts, including some he described as dating back to the time of Alexander the Great. At first glance, the map is a remarkable artifact of early 16th century exploration, showing the coastlines of Europe, Africa, and the newly encountered lands of the Americas with varying accuracy. But it is the lower section of the map that drops a silent bombshell. Below the Atlantic Ocean, the map depicts a long, detailed landmass with bays, rivers, and mountain ranges. Piri Reis labeled this region, but the critical labels are lost to damage. For many researchers, this land bears a startling resemblance to the coastline of Queen Maud Land in Antarctica, but with a profound and impossible detail. It is shown without its massive ice cap, a condition that last existed on that continent millions of years ago. The official European discovery of Antarctica would not occur for over 300 more years in 1820, and its true subglacial topography was only mapped in the 20th century using advanced seismic sounding technology. The implication is staggering. If this is indeed Antarctica, then the map's source information must originate from a time before the ice, suggesting a prehistoric civilization with seafaring and cartographic capabilities that rival our own. Proponents of this view point to the apparent fit of the coastline, arguing it aligns with modern surveys of the bedrock beneath miles of ice in a way that cannot be mere coincidence. They see the Piri Reis Map as a surviving copy of a copy, a ghostly echo from an antediluvian world, preserved through centuries of copying and finally committed to parchment by a Turkish admiral. Skeptics offer a more conservative yet equally fascinating interpretation. They argue the mysterious land is far more likely a distorted, composite representation of South America's eastern coast, perhaps blended with sailors' tales of a great southern land or even a speculative extension of the continent. Maps of this era were often filled with conjecture and mythological places, and cartographers frequently connected disparate reports into a single, imperfect image. The apparent accuracy, they suggest, could be a product of selective comparison and a generous interpretation of the map's features. This debate cuts to the very heart of how we reconstruct lost knowledge. The map forces us to ask what constitutes proof. Is a visual resemblance enough to rewrite human history, or does the burden of proof require corroborating evidence, other maps or records that simply do not exist? The Piri Reis Map does not provide answers, it holds attention. It is a beautiful, enigmatic artifact that sits precisely on the border between a miraculous transmission of ancient data and a brilliant, flawed product of its own adventurous time. It challenges us not merely to look at a coastline, but to examine the nature of evidence itself, reminding us that sometimes the past presents us not with a clear fact, but with a hauntingly perfect question. A map's coastline can be debated, but a book full of words no one can read presents a different kind of silence. The Voynich Manuscript is not made of stone or metal, but of vellum and ink, and its mystery is written in a language that has stubbornly refused to reveal itself for centuries. Discovered in the 1700s but carbon dated to the early 1400s in northern Italy, this small, densely illustrated codex is arguably the world's most famous undeciphered book. Its physical form is ordinary enough, a handwritten volume of about 240 pages, but opening it is like stepping into a reality that is almost but not quite our own. The text flows in an elegant, unknown script from left to right with what appear to be words and sentences. It is not gibberish, it displays statistical patterns consistent with a genuine language, with word repetitions and structures that suggest meaning. Yet, not a single character matches any known alphabet, and not a single word has been conclusively translated. This linguistic puzzle is compounded by the bewildering illustrations that fill its pages. There are sections dedicated to strange, unidentifiable plants with bulbous roots and fantastical leaves, none corresponding to any known botanical species. There are intricate astronomical charts featuring unfamiliar constellations and celestial diagrams, Perhaps most puzzling are the so-called biological sections, which show small, nude female figures immersed in or connected by a network of tubes and vessels, bathing in what seems to be green, interconnected pools. The images feel scientific, like pages from a medieval herbal or anatomical text, yet they depict a science from a dream. For over 100 years, the world's top cryptographers, including teams from both world wars who broke famed military codes, have applied every tool at their disposal to crack the Voynich. Complex statistical analysis, computational linguistics, and historical pattern matching have all failed. The manuscript resists, becoming a kind of intellectual black hole, absorbing effort and yielding nothing. This relentless defiance has spawned three primary theories, each as compelling as it is unproven. The first is that it is an incredibly elaborate and expensive hoax, created to deceive a wealthy patron. A clever forger could have invented a plausible-looking but meaningless script and filled pages with fanciful drawings. Yet, the sophisticated linguistic patterns and the sheer, consistent effort required give even this cynical explanation pause. The second theory posits it is written in a natural but extinct language, so thoroughly lost that its key is gone. Perhaps it records the knowledge of a small, isolated community whose entire cultural context vanished. The third, and most tantalizing, is that it is a cipher, a code so advanced that it masks a genuine treatise on herbal, astronomical, or even alchemical knowledge. Some suggest the text is a form of shorthand or an encoded version of a known language like Latin, with the images serving as symbolic keys that we simply lack the manual to interpret. The Voynich Manuscript stands as the purest form of an intellectual out-of-place artifact. It is not out of place in time, but out of place in understanding. It represents the humbling limit of our knowledge. We can date the vellum, analyze the ink, but the thoughts of the person who put quill to page remain locked away, separated from us by a veil of ink we cannot pierce. It is a reminder that the past can hold a complete, complex world of thought that becomes, to us, a beautiful and impenetrable secret. A book of secrets we cannot read is a profound silence, but a single coin speaks a clear, if solitary, word. Along the rugged coast of Maine, at a well-documented Native American archaeological site known as the Goddard Site, a discovery was made in 1957 that seemed to whisper of distant shores. Among thousands of artifacts left by the Penobscot people, a small, corroded silver coin was unearthed. It was not a colonial Spanish piece nor a British shilling. When cleaned and identified, experts recognized it as a Norse penny, a currency minted in Norway between the years 1065 and 1080 of the Common Era. This tiny object, no larger than a modern dime, carries a geographical weight far beyond its size. It was found in a layer of soil radiocarbon, dated to a period between 1200 and 1300, a time when Norse settlements in Greenland were active and sagas spoke of a land to the west called Vinland. The Maine Penny, as it became known, is not a questionable artifact from a private collection. Its provenance is solid, its archaeological context is recorded, and its authenticity as a medieval Norse coin is undisputed. This makes it one of the most credible pieces of physical evidence for pre-Columbian transatlantic contact in North America, outside of the confirmed Norse site at Elance Orks Meadows in Newfoundland. Its very existence asks a direct and challenging question. How did a coin from 11th century Norway end up in a 13th century Native American shell midden on the coast of Maine? The debate around this question reveals the complex dance between evidence and interpretation. One compelling theory is the most direct, that Norse explorers, either from the Greenland settlements or from voyages farther south, traded this coin with indigenous peoples. Perhaps it was part of a larger exchange of goods, a curiosity passed from hand to hand along vast native trade networks that stretched deep into the continent. The coin's pierced hole suggests it may have been worn as a pendant, valued more for its exotic material and shape than for its monetary worth. In this scenario, the Maine Penny is a solitary survivor, a lone metallic witness to a brief, forgotten encounter between two worlds. Skeptics offer a more cautious explanation. They point out that only one such coin was found among 12,000 other indigenous artifacts at the site. Could it be a case of modern contamination? A collector in the early 20th century might have dropped it, or it could have been mixed into the soil from a later era. Yet, the careful excavation methods and the coin's position within a dated stratum make this less likely, though not impossible. The possibility also exists that it traveled not via a Norse hand, but through extended indigenous trade routes that connected the Arctic, where Norse goods are known to have been traded with the Inuit, down the Atlantic coast over generations. Regardless of the precise journey, the Maine Penny's significance is undeniable. It punches a small, clean hole in the isolationist narrative of the New World. For centuries, the story taught was of a hemisphere discovered by Columbus in 1492, a pristine wilderness awaiting European arrival. This coin, resting quietly in the soil of Maine, contradicts that simplicity. It suggests that the Atlantic was not an absolute barrier, but a challenging highway occasionally crossed. It hints at sporadic, unrecorded journeys, moments of contact that left little trace beyond a story in a saga and a single silver disc in the dirt. The coin does not prove a Norse settlement in Maine, nor does it rewrite every history book, but it does something perhaps more important. It introduces an element of plausible connection, a tangible thread linking the old world and the new long before the age of exploration was officially declared. It reminds us that history is often written by the loudest narratives, the ones with armies and chroniclers, while the quieter stories, those of a single trade, a curious glance, and a coin kept for generations, are whispered only by the objects left behind. A single coin whispers of forgotten journeys, but a wedge of metal shouts a challenge to the very foundations of industry. Deep within a sand quarry on the banks of the Mureș River in Romania, workers in 1974 made a discovery that seemed to layer time itself. Buried approximately 35 feet down, they uncovered two large mastodon bones, relics of a prehistoric giant. Nestled beside those ancient remains was a strange, heavy object, unlike any stone or bone. It was retrieved, cleaned, and its true nature began to emerge. The object was a wedge-shaped piece of metal, surprisingly lightweight for its size, with a concave area and two small, perfectly circular holes. Initial analysis identified it as aluminum, but not just any aluminum. Further testing revealed it was a complex alloy composed of 89% aluminum, with the remainder being copper, zinc, lead, and other trace elements. On the surface, this seems unremarkable. Aluminum is everywhere in our modern world, from soda cans to aircraft frames, but that is precisely the problem. The context of the Aiud Wedge, as it is now known, places it in a geological stratum alongside extinct mastodon remains, a layer conventionally dated to around 11,000 years before the Common Era. This date is the heart of the anachronism. Pure, refined aluminum does not occur naturally in the Earth's crust. It is locked tightly inside bauxite ore. To liberate it requires an immense amount of electrical energy in a process called electrolysis, a technology that was not invented until the 1880s. The industrial production of aluminum is a defining hallmark of the modern age. Finding an aluminum alloy in a context that predates the pyramids by millennia is akin to finding a smartphone chip in a medieval castle. It is a material that simply should not exist. The immediate, earthbound explanation offered by skeptics is compelling. The wedge, they argue, is almost certainly a piece of modern machinery. Its shape and holes are reminiscent of a tooth from a large excavator bucket or a mining drill bit, tools that would have been used in the very quarry where it was found. The theory posits that it broke off during 20th century work, fell into a crevice, and through natural sedimentation or slumping, became buried among the much older mastodon bones, creating a false but convincing archaeological context. This is a classic case of intrusion, where a newer object is introduced into an older setting, tricking our sense of chronology. Yet, proponents of the artifact's antiquity point to a thick, hard layer of oxidation that had formed on its surface, a patina they argue would take more than a few decades to develop. They question whether a piece of modern equipment could have become so deeply embedded and chemically altered in such a short time. The debate circles around the same core issue, context versus object. Do we trust the reported location and depth of the find, or do we trust the overwhelming historical record of metallurgy? The Aiud Wedge may never be definitively solved, as its original excavation was not conducted by archaeologists under controlled conditions, leaving room for doubt about its precise placement. But its power as a mystery endures. It forces us to confront the fragility of our historical narratives when faced with a physical outlier. It asks us to consider the unthinkable, that the mastery of materials might not be a linear progression from copper to bronze to iron to steel, but a story with lost peaks and forgotten valleys. Perhaps in some distant epoch, a different path of discovery was briefly walked. Its only remnant this enigmatic, lightweight wedge resting silently beside the bones of a forgotten world. The silent, solitary wedge of Aiud speaks of lost metallurgy, but a gathering of silent giants in the jungle whispers of a different kind of forgotten mastery. Scattered across the river deltas and jungle floors of Costa Rica's Diquis region are hundreds of stone spheres, ranging in size from a child's plaything to colossal orbs over 6 feet in diameter and weighing several tons. Their most immediate feature is their near-perfect geometry, a smooth, rounded form that seems to defy the rudimentary tools traditionally associated with the pre-Columbian cultures of the area, who crafted them from around 600 of the Common Era up until the arrival of Spanish colonizers. These are not naturally formed boulders weathered by time. They are deliberately, painstakingly made objects, shaped from hard granite and other local stone. The mystery of the spheres is not one of impossible material, but of immense, focused effort and unexplained purpose. To create such precision with stone hammers and abrasives would have required generations of sustained labor, a communal commitment that speaks to a highly organized society with specialized craftsmen. How did they achieve such symmetry without modern measuring devices? Some researchers suggest they may have used a system of counterweights and careful grinding, slowly rotating the stones over years to wear them into shape. The sheer investment of time and social resources is staggering to contemplate. This leads directly to the deeper puzzle: why? What compelled an entire culture to dedicate so much energy to creating these silent stone planets? Theories about their function are as varied as the spheres themselves. Some were found arranged in lines or geometric patterns, often aligned with cardinal points or astronomical features, suggesting they could have served as a giant celestial calendar or observatory, marking solstices or other important celestial events. Others believe they held profound social or spiritual significance, perhaps representing the sun, the moon, or celestial bodies in a cosmological map, or serving as markers of authority, placed near the dwellings of chiefs to denote status and power. Their perfect form might have symbolized unity, the cosmos, or ideals of harmony and balance. Yet, with no written records from the creators, their true meaning remains locked within the stone. Many spheres were moved from their original locations by later agricultural work, or even dynamited by treasure hunters believing they held gold, forever scrambling their ancient arrangements and erasing crucial contextual clues. While not anachronistic like a battery or a computer, the stone spheres of Costa Rica are a powerful cultural out-of-place artifact. They represent a peak of engineering and abstract thought that does not neatly fit into the standard narrative of the region's history, which often emphasizes more practical crafts. They hint at a layer of sophistication in mathematics, social organization, and symbolic thinking that we are still struggling to fully appreciate. They stand as a monumental reminder that the past is not just a record of survival, but of aspiration. A society looked at a block of unyielding granite and saw within it the potential for perfect form, and then, with relentless patience, brought that vision into being for reasons that now echo only as a silent stone question across the centuries. A perfect sphere is a monument to communal purpose, but a slab of stone can become a battleground for identity. In the autumn of 1898, a Swedish immigrant farmer named Olof Oman was clearing trees on his land near Kensington, Minnesota, when his plow struck a large, flat stone tangled in the roots of an aspen tree. The stone, weighing over 200 pounds, was covered on its face and one side with strange, carved characters. When local scholars examined it, they identified the writing as runes, the ancient alphabet of the Norse. The inscription, once translated, told an astonishing story. It claimed to be a record left by a party of 8 Goths or Swedes and 22 Norwegians on an exploration journey from Vinland to the west. Most startlingly, it was dated the year 1362. It described a tragic event, stating that 10 of their men had been lost, with 10 men by the sea, to look after our ship's 14 days' journey from this island. The message ended with a plea for rescue. If genuine, the Kensington Runestone would be a revolutionary document. It would place Norse explorers not just on the coast of North America, but hundreds of miles inland, deep into the heart of the continent, a full 130 years after the last known Norse voyages to Greenland and a century before Columbus. It would fundamentally rewrite the narrative of European contact with America, shifting credit from Mediterranean sailors to Scandinavian adventurers. The stone ignited immediate and fierce controversy. Mainstream linguists and historians subjected the inscription to intense scrutiny and found it deeply problematic. They pointed to numerous grammatical and orthographic errors in the runes, inconsistencies that suggested a modern forger with a passing, imperfect knowledge of medieval Norse language had created it. The specific mix of runic styles seemed anachronistic, blending forms from different centuries. Furthermore, tool mark analysis suggested the carving had been done with relatively modern implements, not with the chisels of the 1400s. The most widely accepted academic conclusion is that the stone is a 19th century hoax, likely crafted by Oman himself or others in the local Scandinavian immigrant community. The motive, in this view, was not malice but a powerful cultural pride. These immigrants, carving out a new life in a land dominated by English and other European narratives, may have sought to plant a deep, ancient root for their own presence, to inscribe their heritage directly into the bedrock of American history. Yet the stone has never lacked for passionate defenders. They argue that the weathering of the inscription, with its softened edges and mineral deposits within the carved lines, indicates great age, inconsistent with a recent creation. They propose that the linguistic quirks could be explained by the isolation of the explorers, their language evolving or simplifying over a long journey, or representing a specific dialect now lost. Some point to historical records of a Norse expedition that went missing in the 1300s, suggesting the stone could be its lone, cryptic memorial. The Kensington Runestone thus transcends archaeology to become a powerful cultural symbol. It embodies the profound human conflict between a desired history and an evidenced one. For many in the upper Midwest, particularly those of Scandinavian descent, the stone is a point of deep pride, a tangible link to a bold, exploratory past that predates the standard textbook story. It represents a narrative of belonging, a claim that their ancestors were not just late arriving immigrants, but some of the continent's earliest European visitors. This emotional investment makes objective analysis exceptionally difficult, as the artifact becomes entwined with community identity and legacy. The stone's true lesson may not be about the 14th century, but about the 19th and our own. It demonstrates how an out-of-place artifact can become a mirror, reflecting not ancient mysteries but contemporary hopes, conflicts, and the enduring need to find one's own story written in the stones of a new land. It challenges us to ask where the line falls between patriotic inspiration and historical fact, and how we navigate that delicate space when a single object seems to promise both. A cultural claim carved in stone gives way to a message written on the very skin of the earth. Across a vast, arid plateau in southern Peru, the Nazca culture left behind a gallery so immense it defies ground-level comprehension. From roughly 500 years before the Common Era to 500 after, they transformed their desert landscape into a canvas, creating hundreds of geoglyphs by removing the dark, sun-baked surface stones to reveal the lighter-colored earth beneath. These are the Nazca Lines, a collection of straight lines that run for miles, geometric shapes like trapezoids and triangles, and over 70 intricate drawings of animals, plants, and mythical beings, including a hummingbird, a spider, a monkey, and a humanoid figure often called the astronaut. Their scale is staggering, with some individual figures stretching over 600 feet long, the size of multiple football fields, but their most defining mystery is one of perspective. From the ground, these designs are shallow, indecipherable grooves. Their full, breathtaking form is only visible from high above, a fact that has fueled a century of speculation about their creator's vision. How could a people who lived nearly 2,000 years ago design and execute artwork meant to be seen from a vantage point they could never naturally achieve? The most famous and dramatic theories reached for the skies, suggesting the lines were landing strips or signals for ancient astronauts, or that the Nazca people themselves had mastered early flight using hot air balloons made from local materials. While these ideas capture the imagination, archaeological research has uncovered more grounded, though no less brilliant, explanations. Studies suggest the Nazca used simple but effective surveying techniques. They could have constructed small-scale models on prepared plots of land, then scaled up the designs using a grid system of stakes and ropes, a method well within their known capabilities. The straight lines, some of which align with the points where the sun sets during solstices, indicate a deep understanding of astronomy, likely linking the figures to celestial cycles, water sources, and mountain deities. The purpose of the lines was almost certainly spiritual and ceremonial, a form of landscape art designed not for human eyes but for the gods. By walking the lines in ritual processions, the community may have been performing acts of communication with the divine, perhaps to petition for life-giving water in one of the driest places on earth. The figures themselves often represent animals associated with water or fertility in Andean cosmology. The Nazca Lines, therefore, are not an out-of-place artifact of technology, but of perspective and ambition. They challenge our modern assumption that large-scale works require a modern, practical purpose. They represent a different way of seeing the world, where the land itself is a sacred text, and the act of altering it is a form of prayer visible to the heavens. They force us to expand our definition of engineering to include not just the mechanical, but the ritual, proving that a civilization can achieve monumental, precise works driven by faith and communal purpose, creating a legacy that only the passing centuries and the open sky could ever truly reveal. The desert canvas of Nazca speaks to the heavens, but within the carved stone walls of an Egyptian temple, a different kind of light flickers in the shadows. In the crypt of the Hathor Temple at Dendera, a series of intricate stone reliefs have ignited a modern debate that pits myth against machine. One particular panel shows a scene that feels eerily familiar to a 21st-century eye. Two figures are depicted holding what appears to be a large, elongated glass bulb. Inside this bulb wins a serpentine form, strikingly similar to the filament of an incandescent light. This central object is connected by a cable to a box, which a kneeling figure touches, and is supported by a pillar topped with a symbol. To many viewing this image, the interpretation seems obvious. It is a diagram of an ancient electric light bulb, complete with its power source and cables. Proponents of this view point directly to the Baghdad Battery as the plausible technology that could have powered such a device, suggesting the relief is not symbolic art, but a technical illustration of forgotten knowledge. They ask, why would ancient artisans go to such lengths to depict a bulb, a filament, and connecting wires if they were not representing something they had seen and used? The imagery seems too precise, too functional to be mere fantasy. It presents a tantalizing possibility that the dark depths of pyramids and tombs might have been illuminated not just by flickering torchlight, but by the steady glow of electric lamps. This interpretation transforms the temple wall from a record of faith into a schematic of lost science. Yet, Egyptologists offer a profoundly different reading, one rooted in the rich symbolic language of ancient Egyptian religion. In their analysis, the bulb is not a bulb at all, but a stylized representation of a lotus flower, a sacred symbol of creation and rebirth. The serpent inside is not a filament, but the snake god Harsomptus, emerging from the lotus as a manifestation of life force. The box is interpreted as a depiction of the Djed pillar, a symbol of stability, and the entire scene is a visual narrative of a creation myth, showing the moment the sun god is born from the primordial waters, represented by the lotus. The kneeling figure is not an electrician, but a priest facilitating a sacred ceremony. This explanation is not a dismissal, but a translation, decoding the image according to the cultural lexicon of the people who carved it. The Dendera relief stands as a perfect case study in the power of perspective. It demonstrates that an out-of-place artifact is not always about the object itself, but about the lens through which we choose to examine it. Do we see our ancestors as literal engineers or as profound myth-makers? The relief forces us to confront our own biases, our tendency to project our technological world view onto cultures that may have expressed their understanding of cosmic forces through an entirely different vocabulary of symbol and story. It reminds us that the most enduring mysteries often lie not in what was built, but in how we choose to read the instructions they left behind. The silent glow of a carved bulb gives way to a heavy, metallic question buried deep in the earth. In 1885, at a coal mine in Wolfsegg, Austria, workers splitting a seam of tertiary coal uncovered a small, dense object that stopped them cold. It was a nearly perfect cube of iron, just over 2 inches on each side, with a deep groove circling its midsection and rounded edges. The coal bed from which it came was conventionally dated to be many millions of years old, a period long before the emergence of any creature remotely capable of forging metal. This object, known as the Wolfsegg iron cube or the Salzburg cube, presented a paradox as solid as its own form. Here was a clearly manufactured item, a cube of forged steel, resting in a cradle of prehistoric vegetation turned to stone. The initial scientific report caused a sensation, as it seemed to suggest the impossible human industry in an age of primordial swamps. The artifact appeared to be a defiant anachronism, a wrench thrown into the smooth gears of geological time. Its discovery forced experts to confront a stark choice. Either our understanding of the Earth's strata was fundamentally flawed, or this cube had found its way into that ancient bed through some other, more recent means. The most plausible explanation, and the one widely accepted today, is one of intrusion. The cube is almost certainly a piece of mining debris from a much later period. It could have been a fragment of a drill bit, a broken tool, or even a weight used in surveying that was accidentally dropped or discarded in the mine shaft during earlier, unrecorded workings. Over time, through collapses, flooding, or the constant shifting of material, it could have settled deep into the coal seam, becoming naturally embedded and creating a perfect illusion of immense antiquity. This process, where a newer object is introduced into an older geological context, is a known challenge in archaeology and geology. It creates a powerful false association, a trick of stratification that can easily mislead. Yet the Wolfsegg cube, like the London hammer before it, holds a deeper lesson beyond its likely mundane origin. It represents the critical importance of context in interpreting any discovery. An object alone tells only half a story. Its true meaning is unlocked by its surroundings, the layer of earth it rests in, the artifacts beside it, and the integrity of the site itself. When that context is disturbed, whether by natural forces or human activity, the story becomes fragmented, open to dramatic and often erroneous interpretation. These objects test the limits of stratigraphic interpretation, pushing us to refine our methods and question our assumptions. They remind us that the Earth's layers are not always a neat, undisturbed library, but can sometimes resemble a book whose pages have been shuffled by time, water, and the works of those who came before us. The cube's enduring mystery, therefore, is not about ancient steelworkers, but about the patient, complex dialogue between human activity and the geological record. A conversation where a single misplaced piece can whisper a compelling, if ultimately incorrect, secret about the deep past. A cube of forged iron whispers of geological confusion, but a woven tapestry shouts a clear and brilliant truth about the medieval mind. Stretching over 200 feet long, the Aiud tapestry is not truly a tapestry at all, but an immense embroidered linen cloth created in the 1100s to commemorate William the Conqueror's invasion of England. It is a breathtaking narrative scroll in thread, detailing the events of 1066 with the urgency of a modern graphic novel, complete with armies, ships, and political intrigue. Yet, amid the scenes of human ambition and conflict, a celestial messenger makes a startling appearance. One panel shows a crowd of frightened men pointing upward at a star with a long, fiery tail. The Latin inscription above it reads plainly, Isti Murant Stella, meaning, they marvel at the star. Historians universally agree this is a depiction of Halley's Comet, which made its spectacular pass in the spring of 1066, an event recorded by astronomers across Europe and Asia. The comet's appearance was seen as a divine omen, a portent of the monumental change about to sweep England. Its inclusion in the tapestry is not anachronistic, the timing is perfect. The profound significance lies not in the object itself, but in the witness it bears. This embroidered comet is a powerful rebuttal to the outdated notion of the Dark Ages. Here, in a work of political propaganda and artistic genius, we find embedded a precise record of an astronomical event, seamlessly woven into the cultural and historical narrative. The artisans who created this panel did not see a separation between the story of kings and the story of the heavens. They understood them to be intimately connected. The accurate depiction showing the comet's core and distinct tail demonstrates careful observation. It signifies that in an era often mischaracterized as ignorant of the natural world, there existed not only the ability to observe such phenomena, but the sophistication to integrate that observation into a complex work of art meant to convey power, legitimacy, and divine favor. The Aiud tapestry challenges us to expand our definition of an out-of-place artifact. It reminds us that sometimes the anomaly is not a physical technology, but a preserved insight. The tapestry is a testament to a culture that watched the sky with a discerning eye, understood the weight of celestial events, and possessed the artistic and intellectual capacity to stitch that understanding into the very fabric of their history. It stands as a luminous thread in the human story, proving that advanced observation and cultural expression can flourish long before the official dawn of modern science. Gold in the hands of the Quimbaya artisans became more than just a sacred metal. Between 1000 and 1500 of the Common Era, in the river valleys of what is now Colombia, this civilization crafted thousands of small, intricate figurines from tumbaga, an alloy of gold and copper. Many depict human figures, animals, and deities with beautiful, stylized simplicity. But a particular group of these objects, unearthed from ancient tombs, refuses to sit quietly within the category of ritual art. To a modern eye, they look uncannily like sleek delta-wing aircraft or futuristic jets. They possess a central fuselage, swept-back wings, and a distinct vertical tail stabilizer, features that seem to transcend any known insect, bird, or fish from the region. These so-called Quimbaya jets present a silent, golden riddle. Are we looking at the artistic imagination of a master goldsmith or a frozen moment of observation? The official archaeological interpretation is firmly rooted in the natural world. Scholars point out that the Quimbaya had a profound, symbolic relationship with their environment. Many of their other artifacts clearly represent local fauna like bats, frogs, and birds. The aircraft-like figurines, they argue, are simply highly stylized depictions of flying creatures, perhaps a seed pod gliding on the wind, a stingray, or a bird with its wings swept back in a dive. Stylization is a universal artistic principle, simplifying and exaggerating forms for symbolic or decorative effect. In this view, the resemblance to modern aircraft is a classic case of pareidolia, our brain's tendency to see familiar patterns, especially technological ones, in ambiguous shapes. We project our own world onto the past, seeing jets where ancient eyes saw the grace of a bird in flight. Yet, the plot thickens when these small gold objects are subjected to the cold, analytical environment of a wind tunnel. Enthusiasts and some researchers have created precise, scaled-up models of the most aircraft-like figurines. When tested, several of these models have demonstrated remarkable aerodynamic properties. They exhibit stable glide patterns, with the wings providing lift and the vertical tail preventing spin. Some replicas have even been equipped with small propellers and power sources, and have reportedly achieved stable, powered flight. These experiments are not conclusive proof of ancient aviation, but they add a layer of tangible, physical intrigue to the debate. They show that the forms chosen by the artists, whether by accident or intention, align with principles of flight that humanity would not formally understand for another 1,000 years. This places the Quimbaya artifacts on a fascinating razor's edge. They force us to ask a profound question about the nature of inspiration itself. Where is the line between an artist abstracting the shape of a bee or a bird and an artist recording with symbolic shorthand the form of something more complex? Could these be representations of now extinct flying creatures whose anatomy we simply no longer recognize? Or do they point to a more controversial possibility, that the artists witnessed something in their world that inspired this specific aerodynamic silhouette? The gold does not speak, it only holds its shape. The true lesson of the Quimbaya jets may not be about proving pre-Columbian aerospace, but about humility. They remind us that ancient art is not merely decoration, it is a language, and sometimes the vocabulary of that language includes shapes that resonate with a future the artists could never have imagined, leaving us to wonder if we are looking at a bird, a symbol, or the ghost of a forgotten idea, perfectly formed in gold. The gold of the Quimbaya leaves us in a world of symbolic interpretation, but some objects emerge from the earth with a claim so ancient it defies all symbolic meaning. In the deep mines of South Africa, workers have brought to light a collection of small, enigmatic objects that challenge not just history, but the very timeline of life itself. Known as the Klerksdorp Spheres, these artifacts are metallic, often disc or sphere-shaped, and most intriguingly, many are etched with 3 parallel grooves running perfectly around their equators. They were found embedded in pyrophyllite deposits, a mineral layer dated to an almost incomprehensible 2.8 billion years old. To grasp that scale, consider that this era, the Precambrian, predates the first complex life on Earth by over 2 billion years. The planet was a vast, alien world of volcanoes and shallow seas, with an atmosphere toxic to all life as we know it. In such a primordial context, the discovery of grooved, metallic spheres feels like finding a cogwheel in the dust of a newborn star. The immediate, breathtaking implication is that something, or someone, was crafting symmetrical objects at a time when the most advanced organism was likely a single cell floating in a chemical soup. It is the ultimate out-of-place artifact, pushing the boundary of anomaly from millennia to billions of years. The grooves, so precise and parallel, seem to scream of design, of machining, of a purpose we cannot fathom. They have fueled intense speculation, suggesting everything from relics of a pre-human industrial civilization, a concept that rewrites all of natural history, to even more expansive ideas about visitors from other worlds leaving behind traces of their passage in the deep rock. Yet, geology offers a different, and in its own way, equally marvelous narrative. Mainstream geologists identify the spheres as natural concretions of the minerals pyrite or goethite. Concretions form when mineral cement precipitates and hardens around a nucleus within sedimentary rock, often creating spherical shapes. The famous grooves, they argue, are the result of intense metamorphic pressure. As the surrounding rock was squeezed and folded over eons, the more crystalline concretion within could develop lines of weakness that later erosion accentuated into what appear to be machined grooves. In some cases, the layered growth rings of the mineral itself can create the illusion of parallel lines. This natural explanation transforms the spheres from artifacts of intelligence into artifacts of immense time and immense force. They become products of the planet's own slow, patient artistry, a geology so ancient and powerful it can craft forms that trick our pattern-seeking minds into seeing intention. This does not make them any less wondrous. Their true lesson may be one of perspective. The Klerksdorp Spheres force us to confront the staggering creativity of natural processes operating across billions of years. They remind us that our human instinct to see design is powerful, and that the universe, in its vast and patient workings, can produce shapes of stunning symmetry that mimic our own handiwork. They stand as the deepest of all chronological puzzles, asking us to distinguish between the signature of a mind and the signature of time itself, a question etched in stone nearly 3 billion years before humanity arose to ask it. The final artifact in our journey is a disk of knowledge carved in stone. The genetic disk, a circular black stone object reportedly from Colombia, presents images that feel transplanted from a modern biology textbook. Its surface is divided into sections, each meticulously carved with scenes that the human eye could not naturally see. One section appears to show the stages of a human fetus developing within a womb. Another illustrates what looks unmistakably like cell division, with cells splitting in the process of mitosis. A third depicts male and female reproductive systems with clear anatomical detail. This is knowledge of life at its most fundamental, microscopic level, understanding that humanity only acquired with the invention of the microscope in the 1600s. The disk's imagery suggests a grasp of embryology and cellular biology that seems to leapfrog over centuries of scientific struggle, landing fully formed in the distant past. If such an object were authentic, it would not represent a tool or a map, but a crystallization of profound scientific insight, implying a prehistoric culture that peered into the very building blocks of life itself. The allure is immense, painting a picture of lost scholars who understood the secrets of human origin long before the formal dawn of medicine. This makes it perhaps the ultimate conceptual out-of-place artifact, one that challenges not our timeline of invention, but our timeline of understanding. Yet here the mystery meets a formidable wall of doubt. The genetic disk has no secure archaeological provenance. It was not excavated by professionals from a dated site, but appeared on the art market, its origins shrouded. Most experts in pre-Columbian art dismiss it as a modern creation, likely crafted in the 20th century. The precision of the biological imagery aligns too perfectly with contemporary textbook diagrams, lacking the symbolic stylization typical of genuine ancient American art. It stands as a powerful example of how the desire for revolutionary evidence can sometimes be met with objects manufactured to satisfy that very desire. Its likely status as a modern artifact, however, does not strip it of meaning. As our final example, the genetic disk perfectly encapsulates the recurring theme that has echoed from the Antikythera Mechanism to the Voynich Manuscript. The most haunting and challenging out-of-place artifacts are those that suggest not merely advanced technology, but advanced scientific understanding. A gearwork computer is astounding, but a diagram of a cell division from millennia ago speaks to a different kind of revolution, a leap of intellect. These objects, whether genuine mysteries or clever hoaxes, force us to confront the limits of our historical narrative. They ask if the path of human knowledge is a straight, ascending line or a spiral where profound insights can be gained, lost in the fog of time, and then painfully rediscovered. They remind us that the past may hold silent witnesses to chapters of thought we have not yet learned to read. And so, as we look back on these 20 artifacts, from the rusted gears of a Greek shipwreck to the contested biological carvings on a stone disk, we are left not with definitive answers, but with a richer, more humbling set of questions. The real value of these chronological rebels may lie not in proving any single alternative history, but in their persistent power to ignite curiosity, to challenge dogma, and to keep the story of our past wonderfully, tantalizingly open. These persistent mysteries weave a pattern far more intricate than any single story of gods or astronauts. The true narrative emerging from these 20 objects is not one of a secret history, but of a human past characterized by brilliant flashes of insight, astonishing craftsmanship, and profound connections that flicker just beyond the light of our written records. While the allure of the fantastic is undeniable, the grounded reality is often more compelling. The solid core of our list, the undeniable genius of the Antikythera Mechanism, the tangible spark of the Baghdad Battery, the solitary whisper of the Maine Penny, forces a crucial realization. These are not fantasies, they are documented evidence that ancient cultures possessed capabilities we have long underestimated. They achieved isolated peaks of sophistication that stand as monuments to human ingenuity, not as relics of alien intervention. The mechanism proves that theoretical astronomy could be translated into breathtaking mechanics. The battery shows that chemical principles could be harnessed into tangible effect. The coin suggests that vast oceans were not absolute barriers, but were occasionally bravely crossed. Together, they dismantle the comforting myth of linear, predictable progress. They reveal a story of human development that is not a steady upward climb, but a landscape of scattered peaks and deep valleys. Knowledge could rise to dazzling heights within a culture, only to be lost in the turmoil of collapse, migration, or simply the slow erosion of time, waiting centuries to be rediscovered. The quiet, perfect spheres of Costa Rica or the soaring ambition of the Nazca Lines show us that societies could pour immense resources into endeavors driven by faith, art, or cosmology, achieving engineering marvels for purposes our modern, utilitarian minds struggle to fully grasp. This tapestry of evidence suggests that cross-cultural contact and the exchange of ideas were likely more frequent and far-reaching than our history books, reliant on official chronicles, have led us to believe. A Norse coin in Maine, a Chinese-style map in Turkey, the shared celestial observations embedded in art from Peru to France. These are threads of a global human conversation that was happening long before the Age of Empires declared it so. The ultimate implication of these out-of-place artifacts, then, is not a call to believe in impossible things, but an invitation to embrace a more humble and wondrous view of our shared past. They prove that history is not a sealed and settled account, but a living, breathing mystery, still being written with every new discovery. They remind us that the human spirit, curious, inventive, and resilient, has always been capable of extraordinary leaps, and that the next page of our ancient story might be waiting, even now, buried in the earth or hidden in plain sight, ready to challenge everything we think we know. That invitation to remain curious is the most important artifact of all. What we hold onto is not a set of answers, but a better, more vibrant set of questions. The true purpose of these objects is not to provide a single, rewritten history, but to ensure the story of our past never becomes dull or settled. They are the sparks that keep the fire of inquiry burning. Whether a particular item is ultimately revealed as a brilliant forgery, a case of mistaken context, or a genuine, world-shaking anomaly, its value remains. Each one, in its own way, trains us to look more carefully, to think more critically, and to hold our assumptions a little more lightly. They prove that the field of history is not a dusty museum where everything is already catalogued, but a living, breathing dig site where the next turn of the trowel can uncover a mystery that changes everything. This is why we share these stories, not to convince you of a hidden truth, but to invite you into the ongoing conversation. We encourage you to take this curiosity further. Look up the Antikythera Mechanism's latest reconstructions, read the debates over the Piri Reis Map, or delve into the linguistic puzzle of the Voynich Manuscript. Weigh the evidence for yourself, think critically about the sources, and decide which mysteries resonate most deeply with you. Share your thoughts in the comments below. Let's continue the exploration together. And if you want to join us for more journeys to the edges of the known, be sure to subscribe. The past, as we've seen, is far from finished. It is a patient, silent collaborator, waiting for the right question, the right glance, the right moment to reveal another piece of its infinite, surprising puzzle. Our only job is to keep looking.